Hello, everyone. Welcome to Barron Heights' second program in our sort of, or we're kind of calling it Coping with COVID. We've all been through quite a lot during this pandemic. By the way, I'm Lori Nelson. I'm the Director of Development at Barron Heights. And we put together a little series of programs because we know that every one of our families is just really done with this pandemic and getting a little bit stir crazy and getting, almost desperate for ways that we can continue to cope. Things are not over yet, but vaccines are in sight and we're all lining up for our turn at it. And hopefully in a few months, we're going to be rounding the corner on this thing. But until then, we still need some good guidance. So today I am being joined by Shannon Moody. Hello, Shannon.
Hi, Lori. Thanks for having me.
And Shannon is the Senior Policy and Advocacy Director for Kentucky Youth Advocates. And that is also connected with an organization called FaceIt, the Movement to End Childhood Abuse. So Shannon, why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about what FaceIt is and what your role is and how all this kind of operates.
Yeah, so FaceIt is a movement to end child abuse. It was started by Kozer Charities in 2012, and Kentucky Youth Advocates, which is who I am an employee for, is the backbone organization, which just basically means that we help to oversee the work that the FaceIt movement does, which is really a coalition of over 100 agencies and organizations across Kentucky who have, a desire, a want to make sure that kids and families are safe. So FaceIt is really focused on making sure that people have the tools to keep kids safe, whether it's in schools, in youth serving organizations, at home. And we do so by looking at three different arenas. One is around policy change. The other is around just bringing best practices based on research and data to organizations who serve kids and families. And then awareness building as well, just making sure that folks know what it looks like to prevent child abuse and what it really means to be proactive in that. And that really looks like supporting our families, our parents, our caregivers in their parenting journey. And what we know is that parenting is really tough. And it takes oftentimes more than just the parents to ensure that kids can successfully grow up into adulthood safely. And so what we really want to try to get out there is just that parents really need some love and some support and sometimes a break in order to be successful in their parenting in the way that they want to. So that's what we're here for, and that's what we try to do every day. And we utilize a lot of our partners like Barron Heights and other folks to really make that a reality.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, in today's topic, we're going to be addressing sort of the mind or the psychological and mental well-being and how we can thrive that way during these times. So I think you were telling me a little bit about how FaceIt has responded to the pandemic, and you were discussing what pandemic parenting. Maybe you could talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, I like coping with COVID too, but pandemic parenting is something that we saw. There was people were using a hashtag on Instagram and Twitter about the difficulties of parenting when this pandemic began. And what we were really attempting to do is to bring folks awareness and ideas around how to parent in this age of social distancing, physical distancing, non-traditional instruction at home, having to worry about potentially not having your typical support systems because of the risk of spreading the virus. So we really wanted to identify ways to make it a little bit easier, hopefully, for parents to come up with ways to keep themselves sane, keep their kids sane, reduce stress, and also continue to reduce social isolation. We have to physically distance, but we don't have to socially distance. So coming up with creative ways to do that and support each other as we do that. And we also developed what we have kind of coined like the 6 strategies for self-care. which
Mhm.
I can talk a little bit about, and what that looks like, is the importance of self-care is so high and so needed right now.
Mm. What are some, before we jump into that, what are some of the big issues that parents are dealing with right now with their kids and that mental kind of well-being?
Yeah, so what we've seen, and what some research, some kind of preliminary research has been showing us, is that there have been increases in anxiety and depression for both parents and caregivers, as well as the kids in their care. Teenagers are really facing a hard time without having that socialization with their peers, and often an outlet with sports or other activities. So we're seeing an increase in anxiety, an increase in depression, an increase in irritability, a lack of interest in typical, things that folks are interested in. And it's normal. It's people need to remember that, like, we're social by nature. We are communal people, and when we don't have that access to that community, it can really take a toll on how we function and how we're doing mentally.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are issues that just about every family is facing. It's just been so stressful for everyone. So,
Yeah, and it's especially stressful for our parents and caregivers who have kids with needs that are outside of what folks are talking about in the news. If you have a child with a developmental or intellectual disability, it gets even harder, right? So I have a colleague who has a son who has severe autism, and one of the favorite things his son would do is walk through Costco or go for car rides, because that's just how they spent time, and that's what his son enjoyed. And it's been really difficult for his son because he doesn't understand why they can't go walk to Costco and walk through Costco. And it's hard on the parent because he doesn't want to disappoint his child. And he also, needs a means of some of that stress reduction and isolation reduction as well. So it's taken a real toll and has really disrupted routines significantly.
yeah. Well, but on that note, we do have some recommendations. So let's jump into your tips for self-care.
Yeah. All right. So when we're talking about self-care, what we're talking about is taking care of ourselves and making sure that we are prioritizing taking care of ourselves, because that is what helps us be successful parents and caregivers and successful colleagues, and whatever roles and hats you wear. So one of the things that we talk about that's really important, and one of the things that people kind of roll their eyes at me when I suggest, but I promise there's research behind it, is to just allow yourself to feel your feelings. Give yourself permission to acknowledge how you're feeling, whether it's irritability, stress, happiness, anxiety, and feel it, and process it and acknowledge it. And one of the things that we have learned recently through research is that there's a recommendation that you should cry. You should have a good cry and release that tension. There's research behind the utilization of crying that shows that you release tension, and there is a hormone that's released when you do so. So much so that in Japan they have started crying clubs where people just get together and have a good cry and then go on about their day, and it helps to relieve that tension and pressure that builds up throughout the day, and allows you to kind of regain some sense of stasis. So go find a movie that really is a tearjerker, or something that gives you some of those feels, and just let yourself kind of be and release it.
I think
So
that is such an important point to make. I'm a weeper. When the pandemic first happened and we were all running amok and just, terrified and didn't know what was happening, I just could not stop crying. But it was such an outlet of release for me. And I did breathe. I looked it up, and the hormones that you release are completely different than your normal tears.
yeah.
Are stress relievers. So I'm all for
Yeah.
getting back weeping.
Yeah, Lori, I'm not a big crier, but I will tell you what, I do feel better after I allow myself to just sit with a sad movie and just let it out.
Yeah.
And then I can kind of go back to, go back to normal or go back to processing whatever other emotions I'm dealing with.
It's like a
So
palate cleanser.
yeah, for sure. So
Well,
outside of
oh, and I also wanted to just say something on, I think probably the people that have the hardest time feeling their feelings are moms because they're in such management modes all the time. So maybe
absolutely.
emphasize a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, moms tend to kind of be strong for their kids and be strong for their family and keep their family unit together. And oftentimes are guilty of not allowing themselves to process and not taking care of themselves. And our caregivers are the we need to make sure that our caregivers are really spending time taking care of themselves, because it's just like that notion of, being in an airplane, you put your oxygen mask on first and then you attend to the passengers. The same thing needs to happen. You need to give yourself that space and time to take care of you before, or in the midst of caring for the children, or other members of your family as well.
Mhm.
Yeah. So another recommendation that we've kind of put together is just checking in instead of checking out. And that just means taking time to sit and reflect and rest at the end of your day, at the beginning of your day, at a point in the day where you are feeling overstimulated, overwhelmed, where you can just sit and kind of take a breath, take a couple of breaths, count in, out breaths, and reflect on what it is that you need. Reflect on, again, just identifying where your emotions are, but also reflecting on, like, throughout the day, kind of like, okay, so here I am. This is what I need to accomplish. Is this feasible? Can I do all these things, or can I move some of these things to tomorrow? Or can I ask for help to get some of these things done, whether it be my children or my partner or spouse or a friend who you can safely contact and get some help with. So just making sure that you're checking in instead of just sitting back on the couch and watching,
Mhm.
movies and kind of like checking out, making sure that you're taking some time to process and feel like you're connected, in order to get that relaxation really to its maximum potential.
Well, and this sounds like something that would really work at those times when you feel absolutely overwhelmed, because it's, I think our instinct is we just run from that. We want to numb ourselves or just escape from it, by doing
Yeah.
those things, watching TV or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
there's a lot of distractions, right? We've got Netflix, we've got social media, we've got all sorts of all sorts of opportunities for distraction. But oftentimes you just need to remember that those are also stimulating. And sometimes you need to totally take away the stimulation and just breathe and just sit in silence, or kind of, take a minute to write it out. There's a lot of ways that you can kind of decompress or check in with how you're feeling in a way that doesn't create additional stimulation.
mm, good point.
Yeah. So another arena that we encourage folks to do is stay connected. So obviously with the pandemic, it has been very difficult to you know physically be in the presence of other people. You might have folks in your bubble that you can do that with, but there are other means of connecting that, thankfully, technology is allowed for, including Zoom, video conferencing, text messages, um, G-chat. There's all sorts of different ways, social media, that you can stay in touch with people and just check in with them. So even if you're having a really rough day and you just send like a red-faced emoji to your friend or your parent and say, like, it's been a day, and just kind of releasing that can be really cathartic, and also it gives them an opportunity to check in with you, right? Or if you have some extra space, checking in with your friend who is a parent or caregiver, knowing that they're also feeling a lot of this, and just saying, like, hey, I'm running to the grocery store,
Mm.
can I grab you something? I'll put it on your porch. Or, hey, I want to get together at 9 p.m. Once the kids are in bed and just kind of vent. Do you have time for that? So allowing yourself to reach out, stay in touch, also just asking for help. I know it can be really hard. It
Mm.
can feel like you are, giving in. But we all need other people in order to really be our best selves. And checking in with your support systems and sometimes asking for help when you need it is one of the most important things you can do for yourself during this time.
And that's often, especially for women, the hardest thing to do because we
Yeah.
just need to appear like we've got it all, all under
Yeah.
control.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that whole idea of like super mom or super dad, where it's just like, I've got all of this, I have it all managed and under control. And you very well could, but like how are you doing mentally
Mm.
while keeping everything together in your household? Are you checking in and making sure that you're feeling okay? So yeah, just normalizing saying like, my kids have been awful today to a friend, them knowing that you're a great mom or great dad, but just saying like, oh, it's been a day. Like I am ready for a time to sleep, a bath, whatever your self-care looks like. So just doing that is really important, and not doing it alone in isolation is what's going to keep everyone mentally well.
Hmm. All right, sounds good.
So another recommendation that we have is, I know we talk a lot about connecting, right, via social media, via text message. We also recommend avoiding burnout by allowing yourself to recharge and reset, and maybe put some boundaries around your social media or technology usage or screen time, right? And this is important for kids too. We know that, again, social media or your computer or other means of technology oftentimes create this stimulation, which is just sometimes in the background. You don't even realize that you're processing, but you're processing all of the time information that you're seeing and reading, even if you're just kind of scrolling on the couch absentmindedly. So taking a minute to sit and think about, okay, how much time have I spent on my computer combined with how much time I've spent on my smartphone and in front of the TV? Have I also taken some time to just sit in some silence, or sit with a coloring book? Even like they make great adult coloring books, so you can sit next to your kiddo and color, and just kind of recharge yourself a little bit. A lot of folks, especially introverts, I'm myself an introvert, I get my energy from being alone and being in quiet. I still need the social, but I that's where I kind of recharge. So acknowledging and identifying how you recharge
Mhm.
is really important, in making sure that you're feeling mentally balanced. So that's what we, recommend. Like there are easy ways to do it. You can set timers on apps for your social media to say like, I only want to spend 30 minutes a day on Facebook or Instagram or whatever you like to use. And you could set that on your phone just to remind yourself. And sometimes you're like, I'm ignoring that setting for today. Other times it's like, yeah, I've probably had enough. I don't know about you, Lori, but sometimes, especially when the news is really ramped up, I will jump on like Twitter, and then I will realize like it's been 45 minutes of
Yes.
me laying in bed, like not sleeping and spending time on social media, which is me not getting enough sleep is not good. And it's usually not good for a lot of people too.
Twitter's my downfall. Just reading news on Twitter all day long keeps you in this perpetual state of, oh my gosh, what next? What's going on?
Yes, yes. Which again ramps up your anxiety, right? Like we've got to remember that like I want to be informed all the time. I'm very curious. But like I also need to remember that that's increasing my anxiety. It's increasing this like tension that I have, that I'm like, what's going to happen next?
Mhm.
Sometimes I just need to put the phone away, put it in another room, get it out of the way so that I can ignore it for a little bit.
Yes, my family's constantly yelling at me to get off of Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. And I try.
Yes, yeah, and it's hard. It's really hard. It's hard to set boundaries for yourself and for your kids.
Mhm.
But just sometimes it's good to notice when you are feeling better because you've spent a little less time. So we just recommend that folks just check in with how they're recharging and how they're using technology and how they're really making sure that they are feeling mentally balanced when
Mm.
utilizing those things.
It makes me wonder if there are some family things that can be done, like everybody unplugs all at once, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good, yeah. There are social media, like family social media plans or family technology plans that you all can sit down, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but everyone can sit down together and kind of make like an agreed upon, decision around what's healthy and what's good for folks.
Right. Okay.
So another area that really relates to body, but is helpful in balancing your mind is how you fuel and move your body. So we recommend, for your mental health sake, enacting some sort of routine that makes sure that you're getting enough water. Like put a bottle on your desk. Make sure you're drinking as much water as is recommended. Getting at least 15 minutes of physical activity a day, and that could be a dance party. Turn on music. Everyone get involved. Get really silly. Shake off the sillies. Or it's a family walk around the neighborhood, or it's a quiet walk by yourself around the neighborhood, or maybe your dog needs a walk. But we recommend like turning on some loud music, shutting everything off, and just like being silly and dancing in the living room, or getting out that physical activity in some way, because it's really good for, one, reducing anxiety, which we know is stored in the body, and then also just sometimes connecting if you're bringing other people into that mix.
Sounds good.
Yeah. And lastly, we like to remind folks to just take note of what is working. So it can be very easy to get in a habit of like seeing and identifying things that are going poorly. Like, we're in the middle of a pandemic. My friend has COVID. I have been in this office for the last 10 months. My kids are just going like totally wild because they're so sick of non-traditional instruction, or they're just like sick of being cooped up in the house because it's cold. It's really easy to see those things and just get really frustrated and go into a spiral of that. So just sitting, and a lot of people do this in a kind of a regularly scheduled way, like where in the morning they'll wake up and set some intentions for the day and identify things that they're grateful for. Or they go to bed, like before they go to bed, they'll sometimes journal about like what has went well, 3 things that I'm grateful for, or 1 thing that I'm grateful for, even if it's really hard to identify if it's been a really tough day. But just acknowledging like, today everyone stayed safe, everyone is healthy, and I cooked a meal that everyone, for the most part, ate. Sometimes it's as simple as like, my child did not throw a tantrum today, or my child didn't throw a tantrum this afternoon. Sometimes it's just identifying those things and taking some joy in it, and just being kind of grateful for what is there and what's going on with you.
Gratitude is like a muscle. You have to keep exercising.
Yes.
The more you do, the more bountiful your life becomes, the more blessed everything seems to be.
That's exactly right. And oftentimes we'll flex that like shame muscle, or the self-deprecation muscle, where we spend a lot of time like talking about and identifying, man, I really failed at this, or I'm a bad parent. Make sure that you're saying to yourself like, I had a bad parenting day. I'm not a bad parent. So making sure that you're not personalizing it too. You can always have a bad parenting day, or your kid can have a bad kid day. But just remembering that you're not applying it to your person, you're applying it to the behavior. My kid had a pretty rough behavior day, but they're a good kid, and we're going to get, we're going to have a better day tomorrow. And these are the ways that we can make sure that happens. So practicing that with yourself, and also practicing it with your kids, can be really helpful to kind of keep spirits up, especially when there are a lot of things that are not going well.
Yeah, I think it's a great little lesson that parents can pass down to their kids. Not asking them, but sort of really doing that with them together, or instilling the practice of that in their kids. That's a whole way, I would think, to turn kids around that are really some issues, with things.
Yeah, it's a great way to model those pro-social behaviors too, and also like being grateful for other people as well, and identifying those people in our lives who are important to us and that we're grateful for.
Mm,
So
yeah.
some things that we also have identified as really helpful for your teen, your toddler, other folks in your home that you're raising, is making sure that you are aware and paying attention to your kiddos' mental health. It is a really hard time for kids right now, especially our adolescents and teenagers, because developmentally they are supposed to be socializing with their peers. That is how they are, typically supposed to be developing normally and in a healthy manner is that socialization with their peers. So it's really hard when they don't have it. So making sure that there is time that they can socialize in a healthy and safe way, whether it's for folks in your bubble that they're physically seeing, or creating ways for them to get together in a chat group or a Zoom meeting, or sometimes kids get together on video games and play video games together. So as long as you're monitoring that and making sure that folks are staying safe, those can be really good ways for your kiddos to socialize and stay connected with other friends and peers. Often, especially teenagers, they don't want to talk to mom and dad, which is totally normal. It's totally normal. So as long as they're talking to somebody else that you can trust and is safe, then encourage that socialization and that discussing of feelings between your kids and their peers, or maybe other trusted adults that they have. Also, remember that sleep is so crucial for our mental health, especially for teens. Just remember that biologically they fall asleep later, they wake up later. That is their natural brain function and development. That is normal for teens. When they hit adolescence, that's just that's how our bodies have grown, used to what's supposed to be normal for our brain development. So just remember that. Make sure that you're setting those routine bedtimes, even if you're not having to get up for school or get up for different things. Acknowledge the small victories for your kids. Sometimes it can be really hard for them to get done with certain projects or chores, especially when they're like, I have all day, I'm not leaving. Remember to acknowledge when they're doing the things that you want them to do, and really positively reinforce that as much as possible, even if it's like, thanks for picking up those socks that have been there for 3 days, or whatever it is. Model healthy behaviors. Make sure that your kids know that it's totally normal to feel stress, to feel anger, to feel happy, to feel whatever range of emotions in a safe way. And you're providing a safe environment to do that. Your kids need to see you process your feelings in a healthy manner, because that then helps to model for them how they can process their feelings in a healthy way. A lot of times that is verbalizing what you're feeling, processing it, having somebody just listen, or sometimes it's journaling it if they're not ready to talk about it. Yeah, Lori.
Well, I was going to say, what do you do if your kids are like really angry? They're just frustrated and they don't have the kind of maturity to kind of handle things that are frustrating.
Yeah.
How do you get them through that?
I think oftentimes it's asking what they need. It's instead of directing, like, go to your room, because tension might be high with you too. It's asking, like, do you need space, or do you need to talk?
Mm.
Do you need to take a walk, or do you need to just kind of let it out and cry? So just giving them some options and understanding that once they kind of get some space, take some deep breaths. That's another way to just remember, like, take some belly breaths, take some really deep breaths, and start to process. It can help to get them calm, and then acknowledge, like, yeah, that was a rough time, or I was really angry about XYZ. So just giving them space, giving them options, and asking them questions, rather than like telling them to calm down. Even if they're angry over something that you think is minor, they're still feeling those feelings. So just acknowledging that they have big feelings, and especially teens and toddlers, they have big, big feelings. So, so just remembering that, giving some space, reminding them to breathe, asking what they need can help to de-escalate the situation.
Mm.
Another thing that can really help to build resilience is helping your kids become problem solvers. So if there is something that they're dealing with in their life, whether it's like school related or they're having an issue with a friend, instead of making a recommendation or trying to fix it for them, help them process how they might solve the problem themselves. So saying like, what do you think should happen? Why do you think that that's the right decision? Asking kind of open-ended questions like, how does that make you feel? What do you think would make you feel better? And helping them to try to solve their own problems helps them grow up into adults who can solve their own problems. So the earlier you do that, and the more often you do that, can really help to build a resilience when the life's disappointments happen, because they inevitably will.
And it empowers them too, then they
Absolutely.
become more confident as they go on making decisions and dealing with that. That's
Yeah,
great.
and that's like a muscle too, right? Like the more that we flex it, the better we get at becoming problem solvers. And we talked a little bit about finding those ways to express the emotions. If you have a child who is nonverbal, there might be some different things that you have found that really work for them for calming them down, whether it's sensory related or going for a walk around the neighborhood, or just sometimes laying on the floor and breathing. Other ways that we, encourage expression of emotions is, verbally, obviously, and then also through writing. So just make sure that you're creating the space, even again, if you find it to be kind of minimal, like it's like, I don't know why they think that's a big deal. It's still a big deal for them. So just creating some space and saying like, hey, how are you feeling right now? What's going on? What are you thinking?
Yeah.
And then, creating the space to have them answer and process. And then what we talked about, Lori, your idea around tools to help on screen time or technology, is the American Academy of Pediatrics has this really cool tool on healthychildren.org, their website, that is like a family screen time plan, and everyone gets together and they talk about what is fair, what works for everyone, and how to set those limits. Sometimes it needs to be a little bit more nuanced than like, you only get 2 hours a day. Well, maybe it's you get your screen time for school, and then after that you maybe get screen time for your video game for a certain amount of time, and then screen time for texting or messaging your friends in a monitored way. Again, remember, we're monitoring our screen time for our kiddos. But come to a consensus as much as possible, and a collaborative decision, so that they understand they have some autonomy too in that, and they can also recognize when the screen time is getting to be a little too much, because kids will tell you oftentimes if they notice that, yeah, I've been on like for 4 hours today, it's probably time to put it away. If you give them the space to talk about it, they'll often be honest and reflective.
Wow, this is all wonderful advice. And I think you were mentioning earlier organizations that are creating some socialization opportunities.
Yeah. So what some things in some places in Louisville and across Kentucky have to offer is support groups for parents and caregivers, and sometimes like opportunities for socialization for kids too. So the Kentucky Partnership for Families and Children is a really good resource for that, and they have a big focus on youth mental health, which is fantastic because it's so important right now. They also have space for parents to come together and support groups. And then also Dreams with Wings here locally has provided some opportunities for that as well. And they serve families and children with developmental and intellectual disability. So they are two places to check out. We also have some other opportunities and ideas for engagement on our website at faceitmovement.org if you want to check those out as well. And if I'm happy to send along others opportunities as they come along for Lori to share, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, this has just been absolutely wonderful. I love the resources at the end of your talk, but how enlightening. I think you've really given our families some very useful tools for coping with COVID. So,
Yeah, hang in there. It is going to get better. And you might come out of this way stronger and way more confident as a parent too. So just remember, like, this is unprecedented. Nobody in who is alive right now has dealt with a parenting in a pandemic, and we are all just kind of figuring it out as we go. So give yourself some grace, reach out, and take care of yourselves.
oh, no, that's lovely parting advice. Shannon, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure to, first of all, meet you, but to chat about these topics. It's been very, very helpful and wonderful. So I hope you
Appreciate
have
it.
a wonderful day. We'll be signing off now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We've got one more talk in our series coming up. So please stay tuned. Check our website for information. And thank you again for joining us. Thank you,
Thanks,
Shannon.
Lori.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Okay, it stopped recording. We hope. Oh, you know what? I'm getting a message that my internet connection is unstable. Are you still there?
I am still here. I can stop the recording as co-host if that makes sense.
Well, no, I stopped it. It should be
Okay.
stopped. It says it stopped. But you know, I'm recording it to the cloud, which we have never done. I have no idea where that goes or what. It's been captured. But that was absolutely great, Shannon. Thank
Oh, good.